right, guys, welcome back. So the week got away from me a little bit. I'm going to post this on Friday, I believe, and I probably will not get another video up until Sunday, but I'll try to do more next week. And of course, we're going to have a ton to talk about next week. I mean, even right now, I have a ton to talk about. I'm going to focus on YouTube comments for today, but I have more asks. We have a lot of stuff that's been going on this past week, especially with Emily releasing her song and more details about the album and just all kinds of interesting things going on that I've not gotten around to discussing in the videos, but I will get to them. I will try to get to them next week. I will do a super week next week, hopefully, and get a bunch of videos done so we can talk about a lot of it. But for today, we're going to do YouTube comments. So let's just dive right in because I do have quite a few of them. All right, there are a ton of white crosses in this episode of DC. It starts with the cross bollard cleat on the boat that Louis and Maggie dock when they first start on their trip. Technically silvery metallic, but when the camera centers on it, the cleat appears white. It stands out against what is probably the black outboard motor. Then we see two instances of infinite or repeating white crosses in the hallway, tiling or wallpaper, and the apartment wallpaper of the building that Renata is trying to get Negan to move into. We saw the infinite repeating white crosses for the first time in Daryl Dixon season 1 when Daryl found his grandfather's grave on the beach at Normandy. Yeah, good tie there. Obviously, those are traditional crosses, but the camera angle with Daryl looking at them through high grass allowed the grass to cover the bottom of the crosses so they appeared symmetrical like a medical cross. I actually loved that scene in Daryl Dixon. I thought that was such a cool element to pull into the story. We see the effect of repeating white crosses in Daryl Dixon season 2 again with Laurent's blanket in the same scene where we see that Daryl has fixed a white cross in the Rubik's Cube. Laurent's blanket is a simple black and white plaid, but I don't think it's a coincidence that it was used in the scene and happens to give the appearance of repeating white crosses. The infinity pattern in Dead City also introduces an extra flourish that matches something we see in Daryl Dixon, the visual effect in the tiling or wallpaper of square white crosses over a dark circle. A square white cross with a center solid circle can be seen standing out among the graffiti on one of the walls of the Demimonde nightclub in Paris. The camera centers it with Isabelle on the left and Daryl on the right, with Isabelle saying, "You've done your part, now I've done mine." I think this most likely takes the white cross and kicks it up a notch to something else. I think most likely this becomes a symbol for a sundog or parhelion. Parhelion? I'm probably not saying that right, sorry. A number of scholars believe that when the Emperor Constantine had his famous vision of a cross in the sky and heard by the sign "You shall conquer," he was seeing a sundog. So the trader's reference to something as valuable as the sun is highlighted, and then dog symbolism, which has been mentioned before probably, and then anything sundogs themselves mean mythologically, or even scientifically, as it is a real phenomenon. Amusingly, I just finally realized that the plus sign on the AMC Plus novel is a square white cross. So we know that Beth is coming in a couple of episodes of Dead City, but the fact that the white cross imagery in Dead City matches the evolving white cross imagery already set forth in Daryl Dixon seems to me to definitely indicate we will ultimately get more of Beth than just the anticipated AU episode. Wow. So thank you so much. Whoops, I just gave you a thumbs down for a minute there. This is so cool. This is such an incredible amount of detail. And I would just add, even though you definitely, like this is inferred, that the fact that Grady had the white crosses on the cars, I mean, all of this can tie back to Beth. It's just another way of saying, you know, why would they be putting these crosses all over the place if they didn't tie back to Beth's arc in some way, right? And to Grady. So thank you for doing that and laying that all out. I don't think I could have come up with that many white crosses, but it's great to see how they keep doing this as a returning or a recurring motif throughout all of the different spin-offs and everything. So that's super cool. Thank you so much for that. Does anyone else realize a pattern? Last episode was flashbacks of Herschel. Third one was Glenn. Who's next in Maggie's line of family she lost? But Beth. Yep, great point. What might also be a reference to Still, I noticed that during the full moon celebration, the glasses Maggie and Louis were given for their drinks were identical to the ones Beth and Daryl used during the game of I Never. Furthermore, I get the impression that the writers wanted to draw our attention to the theme of flight with the scene where Louis turns his hand into an airplane wing and encourages Maggie to do the same. Yeah, for sure. This might suggest that the first letters of the episode titles are indeed meant to be read in three ways: the fight, the light, and the flight. We also know that DD4 is set to feature a scene where Daryl is on a plane. It's not yet clear what lies beyond this plot point or this whole flight theme, but hopefully it has something to do with Beth's return. And yeah, these tarot cards, that was as subtle as a sledgehammer. God bless. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have already seen a lot of flight references. We had them in Fear the Walking Dead, and then of course Carol and Ash took a plane to go find Daryl, and like you said, there's talk of him being on a plane in Daryl Dixon season 4. So yeah, it's definitely a recurring symbol, and I do believe it has something to do with Beth. We just, like you say, don't know exactly what yet, but really great connections there. So thank you for that. Okay, so a couple of notes I made, but you nailed most of them in the video. Louis saying he's never been out of New York City equals Daryl saying he's never been out of Georgia. The still comparisons don't end in this episode. Louis eats one of the red apples. That's another thing to me that signals that Renata is going to die this season, likely in Tenebrae. She will be the darkness that happens before the resurrection, but the resurrection is going to be of Maggie's actual sister, Beth. That's wild about the tarot cards. I definitely clocked that they focused on those, but I hadn't realized that TD did theories about them before. It's been a while, and actually, I'm pretty sure that's how me and WD Way originally connected, was over a tarot card theory, and we've been best buddies ever since in the TD world. There were also numbers at the top of them, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any meaningful analysis that can be done of those. The earthquake and ground opening up at the end, that's so biblical. There's biblical themes throughout the episode and the season. Agreed. The fire truck seemed super pointed because you can certainly talk about Eugene without mentioning the fire truck. This entire episode was just a big wink, wink, nudge, nudge at TD. I agree. I love that they found the grave of the implied lovers. Implied because it's a representation of both Maggie and Louis losing the person they loved and metaphorically dying with them because they haven't truly been living since. But given that this episode is clearly still redone, it can also be seen as the lovers being Daryl and Beth. Daryl also died after Beth died, and we really didn't see him start to reemerge again until the Daryl Dixon show. I agree with that, yeah. Also, because this is an obvious still parallel episode, the fact that Maggie and Louis started to get romantic together proves Beth and Daryl were romantic. Yes, yes. I mean, all of these things, it's like we kind of intuitively know them, but it's very good to state them, and I didn't actually state that, so thank you. I fully expect that we should get the name Beth drop. I said that wrong. The Beth name drop, there we go, in the next episode. Would be super weird that she's suddenly in episode 6, where they haven't talked about her at all in what years. Also, I was theorizing that the next episode, when we should presumably get her talking about Beth, is the one where it looks like they are having a massive invasion of hundreds of walkers. Does this possibly trigger memories in Maggie regarding the missing 17 days? And this is what brings Beth up in her mind. Yeah, that's a good point. Because as I said, it does look like not the entire episode is the AU. Like it's going to start with Negan still being in the bar, and then at some point it will go into the AU. So I'm sure the AU will be most of the episode, like 3/4 of it. But yeah, I mean, you're right. They could still talk about her before the AU begins. And I hadn't thought about that, about all of the walkers triggering memories from the missing 17 days. I mean, definitely a possibility. Wow, what an episode. My jaw was also on the floor, LOL. I noticed so many bird cages in the cabin, yeah, and the yellow dirt bike out front. And when Louis and Maggie were dancing, I noticed one of the ladies who took the lanterns resembled Beth, yes. I feel like I saw her a couple of times in the shot while they were dancing. Yeah, actually, and I may talk about this later. Again, I've just had so many things that I haven't been able to specifically talk about in the videos, but WD Way actually did notice that and took a bunch of pictures, and about how they're like the lanterns that have light, which of course reminds us of Beth and reminded me a little bit of Tangled, the lanterns that they released that kind of looked like that. But there's like a Beth lookalike with blonde hair who is handling the lanterns and is in the background, a lot like the one we saw behind Rick at the in the CRM. I mean, not that she looks exactly like her, but it's just similar that she's like just hanging out in the background, but she's in a lot of the shots. So yeah, I did notice that too. Or rather, I didn't the first time. I didn't pay too much attention to it, but WD Way noticed and brought it to my attention. So I will see if I can circle back around to that. But anyone who wants to see it, just go back and look at that scene. And it's, once you notice it, it's very obvious. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, the scene between Renata and Negan was such a parallel to Beth and Daryl, and still, Renata, you're scared to get too close to more people. Beth, just because you're afraid, and now God forbid you let anyone get too close. But yeah, great catch there on the dialogue parallels. I just found your old tarot card Tumblr post. They are indeed the same cards. Yeah, good for you for digging that out. I didn't even go dig that out. But yeah, I recognized them right away. And it's not like they're like super obscure or anything. I mean, if you look up tarot cards on the internet, you can probably find those ones pretty easily. But it's just interesting that they use the same ones that most of us were using when we were theorizing about that, because they definitely could have used different tarot cards, right? So that's very interesting to me. Okay. The mulberries are interesting. There is Greek mythology around them involving star-crossed lovers. Unfortunately, they both die, which we don't want. This legend was the inspiration for Romeo and Juliet. So, a possible nod to Daryl Dixon 3. This also is an echo of Beth and Daryl coming upon muscadine grapes, probably specifically, oh dear, scuppernong, based on the color, although the dialogue, circumstances, and mood was very different. In Cherokee mythology, the Smoky Mountains are known as Mulberry Place, where bears hold a council and plan to go to war against the humans. Don't know if there's anything applicable. Smokies are further south, not New York. Yeah, but there's also the bear, like the Big Bear constellation, right? That could work into that. Maggie says it's not actually the season for mulberries. In New York State, peak season is May through July, sometimes August. Or is Georgia still her frame of reference? Their harvest is over in June. But they are overdressed for the summer, even upstate. So mulberries would definitely be out of season, and maybe this is September. So the show wants mulberries in this episode, wants them to be a pleasant surprise, but at the wrong time, late. I think Maggie may have even called it weird. They are later than expected, given the timing of raspberries, summer or fall availability, depending, which Maggie thinks they can also find. So combining it all, Beth finds muscadines, while Daryl, incidentally, the variety that is the same as the 400-year-old mother vine at Roanoke. Maggie finds mulberries, while with Louis, they want to go looking for raspberries, but do not. Herschel had gone looking for elderberries for medicinal treatment for Glenn and others. His wife taught him. Side note, this is a berry that cannot be eaten raw. Daryl claims a strawberry plant and survived on wild berries 9 days in the woods as a kid. I happen to think Daryl and the strawberry plant is connected to the Cherokee story of the first strawberry. As a parallel, we see Beth and strawberries in two different scenes at Grady. Something is going on with all of the foraging of berries in the orbit of the Greene family and the romantic partners or would-be partners. See, you guys are so great at picking these things up. I mean, I've done some posts on the strawberries, and I've done posts like about Herschel, but not specifically on the elderberries as a symbol. So this is fantastic. I've never realized how many different types of berries they have pulled in. I will say the way that I would probably look at this is it's a symbol of how the berries nourish them emotionally. So, like having strawberries around Beth shows that she is his emotional nourishment and can help him survive emotionally, that sort of thing. And I'm sure we could find similar things for all of those, but yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for doing all of that research and pulling all of that in. It's really great. I don't have a whole lot more to say about it right now, except I think it's fantastic. So great job. And thank you for sharing that. I will have comments in the morning, but holy moly, this episode, there was so much. I was on the edge of my seat waiting for that Beth name drop and it still did not happen. I feel ya. All right, let's see. So read most of these. All right. I actually got the sense that there was an issue more between Daryl and Glenn than with anyone else. Glenn offers Daryl some of his remaining water and Daryl declines. Glenn insists on trying to get him to take some water. Daryl suddenly bristles and tells him to stop. Very odd. Then Glenn says something about how we all have to work together. This is also weird to me. Daryl is still clearly with Team Family. He is wandering off on his own a lot. So this is about, this is an old Ask video about the episode Them, I believe, right? He's wandering off on his own a lot, sure, but he is still looking for water and food for TF. So I get the sense that Glenn was really saying is that he and Daryl still needed to work with each other, not as in Team Family as a whole or Daryl with Team Family as a whole. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do think there's something there. I don't know what it is, and I don't know that I would jump to it being a problem between the two of them. But remember that if we're talking the missing 17 days, Stephen was the one who posted that shot of the white from inside the white cabin that said open the door. And I've mentioned this before too, but back at the time that, you know, Coda happened and season 5 was on or was just getting over, it was right after that. There was a lot of weird posts that were Stephen and Norman on their bikes, and they would stop at white churches in Georgia and point to them and post them. And now those posts have all been taken down. So it's interesting. I mean, I 100,000% believe that they were doing that to point to the white church and whatever happened that we haven't seen. Like they were giving us hints about the missing 17 days, about them trying to bury Beth at the white church. But it's interesting that it's not just Norman, so it's not just Daryl, it's also Glenn. So yeah, I do agree that there's something there that happened during the missing 17 days, but I don't know what it is. So just another thing that I'm excited to see what it is because it's been so long and it's so intriguing and I just have no idea what it actually is. So yeah, that's a really great observation. You've mentioned many times that you believe Emily is still under contract with TWD and has been this whole time. This, along with your tossing about the idea of a Beth spinoff, or that we see whatever happened to Beth and where she ended up beyond the missing 17 days, makes me wonder if they had been covertly filming a number of scenes with Emily over the years to eventually show. Yeah, I think that they very well could be. We've had a lot of evidence of weirdness, like sometimes her being on set and, going to different places in Europe and disappearing from social media for days. And of course, that could be anything. We can't point to that and say it absolutely is her filming, but it definitely could be too. So I think there's a good chance of that for sure. Confirmation bias, synchronicity, pareidolia, I'm sorry, I don't know that word, are all things to be cognizant of in how we navigate life and whether we believe in signs or not, or on occasion, and what we do when and if we experience such. Looking for Easter eggs in crafted fiction on paper or in film, or themes and patterns woven into plots or typology, etc., especially when writers and producers tell you they are there, is instead more of a kind of forensics. Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing that really kills me about it too, when people get after us and say we're looking too hard. The writers have told us to look hard. They've told us that they leave Easter eggs for us. And of course, there are other Easter eggs too that are not Team Delusional in nature. Things like references to Night of the Living Dead that Nick Cotero puts in, or, things like that. But to say that we're looking too hard or we're looking for something that isn't there, the writers have told us that this is there. So we're not just digging it up on our own. So yes, I agree. So I have some thoughts on this. Confirmation bias is very real, and there are definitely some TD evidence that is super strong and pretty undeniable. And then there are things where even I go, okay, that's just confirmation bias more than anything else. The Sasha Tyreese Gabriel thing, I think, might be one of those. I just did a season 5 rewatch and was specifically looking for this weirdness and came to the conclusion that there might not be any there. Tyreese has plenty of reason to feel guilty, actually. He's the one that convinced Daryl and Rick to not just go in guns blazing and get them back at all costs. He convinced them to do a trade and try peace for a change. He feels guilty because his plan failed. What Gabriel says to Sasha is indeed weird, but only specifically if you are already looking for it to be something Beth related rather than something just Father Gabriel related, because he admits early in season 6 that he was lashing out because the things he was blaming other people for were actually true about himself, and that he hated himself and couldn't deal. So him calling them bad people were actually thoughts toward himself. Him saying you sacrificed one of your own, again, could be related to him sacrificing his congregation to save himself, but misdirecting all that pent-up anger and emotion for himself onto others. Is it possible it's Beth related, though? Sure, but I see a plausible non-Beth explanation for it too. I think TD has some really, really strong arguments, but just have to be careful not to tie literally everything back to Beth, because ultimately that dilutes his strong argument evidence that we actually do have. I mean, you're right that we need to be careful and at least cognizant of confirmation bias. I'm not sure I entirely agree with you on this. There are some parts of it that definitely could be explained as you lay out here, but I feel like if Gabriel was 100% projecting onto Sasha, that somebody would have corrected him or at least questioned him and been like, "What are you talking about? We didn't do that. You're just projecting, dude. You're just having a meltdown." You know what I mean? Nobody corrects him. And the fact that Sasha gets so triggered by it suggests that there's truth in what he's saying as it pertains to her. So, again, I mean, we may be overshooting it. It may have something to do with something other than Beth. That's true. I think either way, it has to do with what went down during the missing 17 days. But I do think there's something there. And, when we find out what it is, maybe it's something really small and not that big a deal and not that related to Beth. Like, I could see that, because I do think that we're going to have some theories that just simply don't pan out because we are looking for more and more and more things. But I do think there's something there. The other thing with this, especially when it comes to Sasha, that has always been very, very compelling to me, is the fact that Daryl turns his back on her at Tyrese's funeral. Like, that is the first thing I think is just, ouch. I mean, her brother just died horribly, and he turns his back on her, which is actually very, very offensive and quite insensitive to do when someone is at the funeral of their only sibling that they just lost, right? And I'm not saying that to be critical of Daryl. I'm just saying I'm curious as to why he did that. There's got to be a reason. And they make a very like they focus on that with the camera. It's very obvious when that happens, and we have no idea why he did that. So because it's Daryl, I tend to think that that has something to do with Beth, but it may not. I mean, again, something that we did not see that happens during the missing 17 days. But the chances of it having absolutely nothing to do with Beth are also quite small, in my opinion. So I do agree with you overall that we need to be careful, and there are some things that we have theorized that will probably not pan out. But overall, I think if they put something into the show and if they focus on it, then there's a reason for it. Gimple is all about the Chekhov's gun sort of thing. He's not going to put something in there that doesn't mean something. So overall, I do think that there's a reason for it. We just don't know what it is yet. But it's a good reminder to have, and I completely understand where you're coming from. So thank you for sharing that. The main problem I have with Maggie in regards to Beth is that Daryl told her Beth was kidnapped but alive, and Maggie chooses to go to Washington, D.C. rather than find her. That bothered me way more than her primarily focused on finding Glenn. Yeah, I can see that. I know everybody has a really hard time with Maggie in season 5, and I almost feel like maybe at some point the writers will come out and explain that. I don't think they can yet because I think it would give us too many spoilers, but I would love to hear them explain what their logic was behind that. And maybe it will become obvious at some point when Beth returns. Yeah, I don't really know what to tell you. It never bothered me all that much. I don't know why it didn't bother me the way it bothered other people. I just kind of figured, well, okay, but Daryl's searching for her and she's going with Glenn. And I don't know, like it just didn't bother me that much. Well, and especially because they didn't know where Beth was at that point. It wasn't like, oh, she's in this area, let's go search for her. They had no idea where she was. So I didn't feel like Maggie was abandoning Beth by doing that. I think they just didn't know. And she just did, I mean, what she felt she needed to do in the moment. If they had known where Beth was, like Daryl had said, okay, Beth is over here, I'm going to get her, then that probably would have changed things for Maggie. She would have been like, oh, okay, I'll go with you. But they didn't know at that point. So I don't know. I feel on the one hand like people are really harsh with Maggie about that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not even overly defending Maggie. I've not been Maggie's biggest fan in the intervening seasons between when Glenn died and now because I always felt like she was really harsh and especially not terribly nurturing to her child. So I can definitely have some criticism for her, but I also just feel like there was a reason the writers did that, and I trust that there's a reason the writers did that, even if I don't understand exactly what it is yet. So it just doesn't bother me all that much. I'm just here for it and to see where it goes. I know this is likely some kind of acid burn that Daryl has been subject to, except that burners do tend to give off smoke, but cauterization is an interesting treatment. They're treating a burn with a burn, and an acid burn does actually cook flesh like fire does. Like cures like is the premise of homeopathic medicine versus allopathic. So maybe a clue that a general pathway to a wildfire cure will be homeopathic in some way. Interesting. And essentially with cauterization, they are fighting fire with fire. For what it's worth, fighting fire with fire is a line in the lyrics of Burning Down the House, the song that played with Daryl leading walkers away on TWD and reminiscent of Still. So this was a comment on Daryl Dixon 101 when they had to cauterize his wound. So interesting line of reasoning for the wildfire cure. I bet Galadriel Jones will be interested in that. All right. So much good stuff from everyone in this video. I forgot about Daryl singing along with Laurent. Hopefully this foreshadows a future duet with him and Beth. Yeah, here's hoping. I think we saw that Maggie had an old picture of her family in front of a farmhouse in her keepsake box at the beginning of Dead City. Yes, we did, and the faces were unclear. We looked hard for Beth in that picture, and you can kind of see someone that might have been her, but it wasn't like a very clear picture of Emily, so they were kind of teasing us with that. I always got the vibe that Daryl was supposed to be about 30 in season 1, but they rarely nailed down any actual ages for anyone except sometimes kids. As far as the coda scene goes, the audience proxy in that scene is Rick. We saw what Rick saw, and in the moment, he probably wouldn't have noticed if Beth and Daryl were having a moment while the exchange was going on, so the audience didn't either. That's an excellent point. I haven't thought about it like that before. So this is in response to people saying, why didn't Beth and Daryl, run together and hug? And I was explaining that in the video, but that's a good point. Like, even if they were, I mean, obviously, Rick would have noticed if they had, run to each other and hugged, but if they were having more of an expression, eye contact sort of thing, Rick would probably not have noticed that at all. So that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way before. Yeah, and good point about Rick being the audience. It'd be interesting if it was revealed that Louis was the pessimistic one in the relationship with his wife. After losing her, he became the optimistic one, for sure. Good point. He did also lose his significant other in an open-ended way, but kept his team family. Just saying. If she is gone, as he says, and left, she might still be alive and may even have been trafficked or kidnapped. Yeah, I've wondered if we're going to see his wife at some point. I'm not like holding my breath that we will, but since they went out of their way to say he never saw her body, he doesn't know if she's alive or dead. It's possible we might see her at some point. If she comes back, that'd be bad for Maggie, but good for the symbolism. Very true. Even aside from this, I cannot tell yet if the romance between Maggie and Louis is set up to fail or succeed. Yeah, good point. Fair. It could just be being used to signify like Maggie's finally open to having another person in her life after Glenn. If Louis isn't who she's finally meant to be with. See Daryl opening himself up enough for Leah and Isabelle, who weren't his endgame either. There's certainly been plenty of parallels between Maggie and Daryl, TD has pointed out over the years. So yeah, that's very true. I mean, Louis could be her Leah or her Isabelle for sure. I think Jenga represents the ruins of skyscrapers in New York City. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, the image is there, huh? And trying to rebuild civilization among physical structures that will be collapsing because there is no way to keep up this physical infrastructure in the TWD apocalypse. Maggie and New Yorkers are navigating a tenuous physical landscape more dangerous than the suburbs or the countryside. Maggie refers to the idea that New York City is a fortress, but it is also a death trap. Agreed. This is another one from Daryl Dixon 102. The song Alouette is yet another French-Canadian reference. Yep. I learned the song Alouette when I was in junior high and took French. We were taught that song, so I've known it for a long time. If the CRM is based in Pennsylvania with Daryl's home base in the Commonwealth in Ohio and Maggie in New York, then they both flank the CRM in between them. But the only way to coordinate and travel from Ohio to New York to plan any resistance is to traverse Lake Erie and avoid Pennsylvania on land. The fact all three are on the border of the Great Lakes introduces a Canadian front if they go to war against the CRM. Ooh, interesting. I like the way you think. The French-Canadian references are giving vibes a la the French and Indian War, but the British won in reality, while in Daryl Dixon we see that England is wiped out, supposedly. Are we entering a reprise of this era, but with the French as the main power and with no British counterbalance? And then there's the whole Newfoundland connection. St. Lawrence is a town in Newfoundland. The St. Lawrence River connects the Great Lakes to the Atlantic. There's the Gulf of St. Lawrence. St. Lawrence is a patron saint of Toronto. I'm imagining some potential action on Lake Ontario as well. The saint for whom all of the above is named is the saint whom Laurent is named after by Isabelle. Wow, that's another great connection. If we are indeed seeing echoes of the French-Canadian frontier, then as we have seen references to Cherokee mythology in the TWD American South, we could soon see the same with Iroquois, Abenaki, and Métis. Super interesting. I like the idea of how they might be setting up the conflict and the future alliances and how they're going to have to set up trade routes and all kinds of things. So that's really fun. Daryl comparing Beth to a dumb college bitch confirms that she is at least 18 and still he sees her as college age. Yes, yeah. It also indicates the attitude of a young man in his 20s who is aware college girls would look down on him as uneducated and would never date him, which further indicates there is no problematic difference between him and Beth. I think Beth's referring to Sophia as that little girl also underlines the idea that Beth herself is not a child or underage. When Daryl shouts, "What do you want from me, girl?" that is a common defensive demand a guy might make of a female in the midst of an argument fueled with romantic or sexual tension. Daryl loses his temper and resorts to manhandling and physically to try to regain control through domination because he feels that she is the one who has the upper hand over him emotionally and he really, really cares what she thinks about him. If he saw her as just a teen, he would not be so overwhelmed. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. He explodes and his behavior is dysfunctional, but she won't have it and puts him in his place while showing him compassion. Beth is a bit immature when playing the drinking game, not realizing the buttons she is pushing with him, but during their fight, Beth acts like a grown woman, not even a teenager, in my opinion. Also, when he gets rough with her, she is pissed and wants him to stop. She's not actually scared of him. I think this also indicates that she sees him as a peer, age-wise, in addition to believing that he's a good guy that she has nothing to fear from. I agree. And I mean, Beth really doesn't ever show that much fear. I mean, I was thinking even at Grady, where a lot of people, even grown women, would show fear because she's dealing with rapists and Gorman is older than she is, and all the police officers are, and they're in a position of authority. And of course, she shows caution. I mean, she understands the danger she's in, but she's not really afraid. Not in the sense that she's going to go shrink in a corner or hide in a closet, So yeah, she doesn't show a lot of fear. And I think that you make a good point about how she does stand up to Daryl and isn't going to let him treat her badly. And that actually shows a lot of maturity, at least in that area. You're right that she doesn't realize that what she's saying during the game is really getting to him. She's not perceiving that. But that also could just be a matter of not knowing Daryl very well yet and not understanding his pain and his past. And I think by the end of Still, then she does, but she just didn't up to that point. So yeah, really, really great points here. Really great insights. Haven't had a huge chance to digest this one. I was definitely disappointed that we still didn't get a mention of Beth at all, given that she's in the next episode. I will say that the preview for next week looks great, though. It focuses on tarot cards. Yes, I'm excited about that, too. Very, very excited. I definitely noticed the end with the walker catching the bullet in relatively the same place Beth did. And House of the Rising Sun was very telling. That was the Daryl Dixon S3 promo song. That's right. I forgot about that. Holy cow. It was in Spanish. I completely forgot that. That's a good point. So we've got symbolic ties then between this and Daryl Dixon, as if we needed more, right? Also, I do think that Negan has feelings for Maggie, and it was most apparent in this episode. Hi there. Hi. This isn't video related, but I need to go down a Beth rabbit hole and watch your videos that I've missed. So I have a couple of things I thought of this season, like a what if scenario. First, when I watched episode 6 promo, I thought, what if we get a 17 days after Coda scene, like a small one, as television dose, is this supposed to be does, when a character hallucinates another character who has been killed off, or has a what if scenario. Usually they show their death scene right before they snap back to reality. So I thought, what if after Maggie sees Beth's death and a big scene we haven't seen before, like after they left the hospital? Yeah, that'd be cool. Or even if Gimple is bold enough, LOL, the episode finally revealing that Beth didn't get a burial before her return, that they have to leave her body behind at one point and they lost her like they actually did. Well, there'll be two types of audience if that happens. The ones that, even though the show confirmed TD biggest evidence, they'll just say that she turned into a walker, anything but Beth being alive, LOL. And obviously us, that has known for a whole decade and will be the happiest part of the fandom, that they just confirmed what we have always known. It would be pretty cool if they do this, but probably not, since Gimple is very secretive, especially since that would bring so many more people into TD, like the people that know about the group and our evidence and theory. That would definitely be enough to join our cool little group. Also, the traitor. Am I the only one that thought that she might be getting all those supplies from the CRM or where Beth is? You aren't, and I haven't talked about that, but some of my fellow theorists have. So yeah, that's definitely something people are suspecting, because they conveniently didn't tell us where she got her supplies from. And another thing I thought of too, when Dillard revealed that he was undercover at the start of the apocalypse, what if he actually went undercover for the CRM, aka the CRM spy theory that we have? And as we have always linked Grady to the CRM, so as we know that the CRM stations people in groups in places in different states, and eventually forgets about them, Dillard being alone all these years, and Beth's famous line, "No one is coming for us," that could be a parallel and linked to each other. Yeah, that's a good point. Dillard is just kind of intriguing, isn't he? I'm excited to see where they go with him. Like, on the one hand, I kind of think they might kill him off by the end of the season, but I also kind of hope they don't, because I feel like they could really do some fun things with him. But yeah, I mean, and maybe we haven't emphasized this enough. I did talk about the fact that he was an undercover detective and tying that to 401 when Zach is guessing what Daryl did and he says detective, homicide detective. But I feel that that is a more significant tie maybe than we've made a big deal about. Because, yeah, I mean, maybe the CRM is the missing piece there that makes it more significant. When Zach says that about Daryl and everything, that's at the big spot. And there are helicopters, which is a tie to the CRM, on the roof of the big spot. And then, of course, there's all the tons and tons of symbolic imagery and everything that happens when the big spot comes crashing down. So, yeah, I mean, just having the mention of Daryl and the homicide cop in conjunction with CRM symbolism may be a great evidence that Dillard, being an undercover cop, will also connect to the CRM, if that makes sense. So that's a really great point. That's a really great point. That is all I have and thought to share with you. I've been excited all week for this episode to just see Beth again after all these years. Even if it's just a what if episode, it's just good enough for us TDers. The time is gonna pay off real soon, and I can't wait. Also, as I've seen in the TD group, that the symbolism leads to Beth getting 3 returns. The first could be a coda after credits scene, either in Daryl Dixon or Dead City, and that it will be a special return scene for us, like to the general audience. It's just the mysterious blonde women, but to us, we're going to know exactly who it is with recites and everything. Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is that, I mean, what if I feel like there's a possibility that people could be disappointed with this AU if it doesn't lead to anything really obvious or physical in the real world that has to do with Beth. So prepare yourself for that. But I still don't think if that's the case, it'll be a loss. I think everything that happens in the AU, I mean, I'm like you, I'm very excited for this episode and to analyze it because everything that happens in the AU is going to be mirrored in the real world with Beth's return. So even if we don't see anything really solid about her return and it really just is an AU, like someone's dream or something, that's okay because it's still going to mean a ton. You know, we're still going to have a ton of fun analyzing it. And I believe every single thing that happens in it is going to be very significant, even if it's only on a symbolic level. So yeah, I totally agree. And I enjoyed your rabbit hole. Herschel's painting a portrait of Marisol on the wall for Louis clearly connects back to the portraits Maggie commissioned from Anne Jadis of Beth Glenn and others at Hilltop. Herschel's artistic style is different, though, in that he incorporated clear symbolism of the sun, drawing from the meaning of her name. So we have more sun symbolism, but now we have an image of a woman who has never actually been a character in Dead City, just mentioned by name. Do you think this foreshadows we likely are going to see Marisol actually come back, or do you think there is something else going on? I am not so convinced this is just a kind gesture from Herschel, and that is the end of it in terms of storytelling purposes. I mean, obviously, I don't know. It is conjecture. So really, we're just going to have to see where they go with it. I mean, you make a good point that with her picture on the wall, and see, we've actually theorized this before, just like, again, total conjecture, coming up with things, but that what if Daryl were to see a picture of Beth that was left somewhere, especially one that was taken, like that was dated and was taken after the events of Coda, that still would not be him finding her in that moment, but it would be him realizing that she lived, right? And that would be really fun if that happened. So, I mean, similarly, because the picture is on the wall, what if Marisol shows up and sees that picture? She would know that somebody she knew, like Louis, had to have been there, right? Like maybe like my husband was here at some point. If they do that with Marisol, then that actually might be a really big hint to what they're doing with Beth. But again, we don't know that they're going to do that, which is just conjecture, and we'll have to wait and see. It is very similar, even though in this case it wasn't a picture, to what they did with Morgan using Abraham's map, right? Because he found this map that said Rick Grimes's name. And so that made him go, okay, Rick has been here. That's who I'm looking for. So even in that case, it wasn't a picture. Oh, except there was the pictures of Michonne and Judith that were etched on the back of the phone, remember, that Rick had? So they've done this before, and they very well could do it again. So I think it's a definite possibility, but of course we won't know until we actually see it. So yeah, good points. 781 happens to be an area code for suburbs just outside of Boston. Interesting. If Emily was filming in Boston for Dead City for some reason, as some folks have been talking about, this could be a nod to that. And if this is accurate, then maybe we have been seeing specific area codes all along in the TWD universe. Yeah, maybe something to pay attention to. Well, the indoor studios for Dead City are in Boston, so yes, she would have been filming there for anything that's on set indoors. Yeah, again, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add to that other than we just need to see what the AU is going to bring us and if there are any clues to that, because I don't know if it's just that, you know, Emily herself was filming in Boston or if Boston is going to be a significant location in the show or in the AU. If it's not, then Boston isn't really going to have a whole lot to do with the symbolism. But if it is, then you could be right that the number 781 is meant to foreshadow Boston. But it just depends on whether they actually use that as a location in the show. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But it's a good question. This could also be a bit of a reach, but the scene where Negan hits Fabian with his glass at the bar, this also made me think back to when Beth smashed the glass bottle over the walker's head in Still when her and Daryl were at the golfers club. Super small, but maybe somewhat of a parallel. Yeah, you know what? I didn't think of that one, but I did think of Gorman when she smashed the jar of suckers, of lollipops over Gorman's head. So we've seen that motion from her more than once. And yeah, I mean, it could still be a coincidence just because, you know, how many ways are there to smash something glass over someone's head? But we also know that Gimple has enough attention to detail that he might be doing that on purpose. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a possibility. So not too much of a reach. Just a question of maybe that's one of those things like, you know, we think that might be a thing and maybe we'll find out that particular thing just is not. It may be, it may not be. I don't know. I don't think the AU sequence will occupy the whole episode 6. On the trailer, we see Negan at the bar before. So it is most likely we have something before the AU, and it's most likely to be that Negan and Maggie conversation where they speak about Beth. Yeah, we've talked about this. If not, it wouldn't make too much sense, but well, we are going to eat it anyway. Yes, we are. I agree. Beginning and ending with Renata gathering torches and pitchforks, perhaps. Yeah, maybe. I am sadly more and more convinced that Renata's micromanaging control style is meant to parallel Dawn's descent from when she took over from Hansen to how things were by the time she died. Dealing out punishments as someone who's pro-death penalty for serious crimes in real life, threatening to hang someone for stealing some food is completely unreasonable to me. Exile the man out of Manhattan. What the hell do you mean? Threaten to hang him in front of his family. Being eagle eyes on supplies so much when she knows when anything has been touched. Lends credence to Renata being a half step from controlling the keys for everything too. Yeah, willing to risk a bunch of her own people to go after individuals who have slipped from her control in rounding up a posse to go after Negan, echoing all the officers Dawn risked to send after Beth and Noah. Like someone else pointed out on another comment from a previous video of yours or ask, I don't have it in front of me, Renata's actress is certainly not hurting for work, so well within the range of possibilities that they only have her for this season. This is gearing up for a literal battle between people's ideals, and they've intentionally put out press recently that JDM was thinking of leaving before this season, plus Seth Hoffman taking over the show, but he's not now, so it's unlikely that Negan will be the one not making it out of this alive. TWD would lose far too many general audience viewers who stayed after Rick was gone if Negan was done too. Yeah, and I think it's a good point about Renata being like Dawn. And interestingly, I mean, there was a lot of foreshadow of Beth not being like Dawn in a negative way, but the whole that she would take over leadership. So I think we have a little bit of a what do you call that? Like a not a dichotomy, but like I guess a foil going on there. Renata will become like Dawn, but Beth is going to be the anti-Dawn in the sense that she will have leadership, but she won't have Dawn's negative leadership qualities, right? She'll actually be a very good leader. So they might be doing that with Renata, showing the parallels to Dawn, which will be the opposite of Beth. So I do agree that she's very controlling about things. And while there are some things you certainly have to create boundaries and rules when you've got a lot of people in a community. But yeah, she's being more controlling than you probably need to be. Is it true she's kind of falling into the trap of demanding respect versus commanding it? It could also be that she is good at leading smaller bands of people, but that is a far cry from what it really takes to run a sprawling dystopian metropolis, for sure. She's not governing people as they are, but how she expects them to be, meaning she has a hard time accepting actual human nature, maybe. Yep, for sure. Given that Renata would have been pretty young at the start of the apocalypse, if she's only seen smaller communities operate the whole time, it'd be very fair for her to be completely unprepared to lead a big one, for sure. Yeah. I agree with you. It looks like Renata might actually follow Dawn's path. As soon as I saw the mural behind her, it jumped out at me as a form of foreshadowing, especially given that the mural is a piece of socialist art, a style created to serve the propaganda needs of an authoritarian communist regime. Of course, I'm not saying Renata will turn into some kind of dictator, but she might become an authoritarian figure. She is an idealist who wants to build a socialist society where everyone is equal, but she might start making poor decisions and resorting to methods that aren't necessarily moral just to avoid losing control over her people, just like Dawn. Guess we have to wait and see how it plays out, though sadly it's not looking very optimistic for either Renata or the community. Ooh, I like this. It's very giving that the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Yep. I think we see a real clear difference in the political philosophy when Renata wants to offer double rations to volunteers, but Negan proposes scavenger rides. The second is far more incentivizing to those willing to take risks. And that's something that we have to kind of acknowledge too, is that Negan, when he was leading the Saviors, it certainly wasn't the most optimal community or the most optimal way to lead people because he was encouraging them to be brutal in order to survive. But if you put that particular aspect aside, he is a leader and he has led before and he has been through both the ups and downs, the pitfalls of leadership. And certainly the group he was leading at the sanctuary is probably a lot bigger than any group Renata has led up to this point. So Even though he does tend to be very pessimistic about it, and you don't necessarily agree with everything he says, it does come from experience on his part, and Renata does not have as much of that. So that's a really good point. The comparison of Renata to Dawn reminded me of something. When Daryl was with the Claimers in season 4, Joe offers Daryl his flask of white lightning, i.e. moonshine. Daryl says, "I haven't been lit at dawn since before," and takes a drink. Yet in that moment, while it is still morning, it is well past actual dawn or sunrise, so the word dawn is deliberately chosen to be included in this dialogue. He could have just said morning. Daryl used the term lit to refer to getting drunk and still, but he also uses the term to mean shoot at the prison, i.e. light it up. Lit is a term used for both. So it seems to me like this could have been a deliberate statement predicting in season 4 that Daryl was going to shoot Dawn in season 5, during which season we see Dawn offer Beth her flask, but Beth refuses. Such an advance overt prediction of Daryl shooting Dawn, a prediction coming out of his own mouth about what he himself will do in the future, not knowing what he is really saying, seems to strongly confirm that there was a lot more going on at Grady as suspected, and with Dawn in particular, than we ever got the chance to see. Yeah, those are some really subtle connections that you've made. But yeah, I agree. And certainly I think there was a lot more going on at Grady than we've seen, but I think we will see it eventually, and it'll be really interesting to go back through all of this later. And I feel like there's so much attention to detail that even though we have paid more attention to it than most of the fandom, it's still going to blow our minds once we realize how much attention to detail there is, and once we understand it, because, by then we'll have the missing 17 days and what actually happened. So yeah, great points. Speaking of the whole stealing rations thing, suddenly I am having a vague recollection we saw canned hot dogs in one of the season's Dead City episode with all the food supplies, like in Daryl Dixon. I just cannot think of what episode. I had never seen canned hot dogs before Daryl Dixon, and I did not know anyone would indeed ever can them. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like people are looking for it. It means I have to hunt it down. I don't know where it is either, but if you find it, yeah, that would definitely be another tie between the two. So let us know if you find out what episode that is in. This is from this video. When was the exact moment Daryl fell in love with Beth? When did Daryl fall in love? While I think Daryl would have experienced some serious heart thumping when Beth looked at him that way and said, "You're going to miss me so bad when I'm gone, Daryl Dixon," I think Daryl fell in love sometime after Still and before Alone, where the audience could not see. We know they were together for a while, and there was a good amount of time between Still and Alone. They've officially said this, and when Beth says, "I'm getting good at this," with regard to tracking, that indicates that Daryl has been training her over that time. They had been together some weeks. After opening up to each other in Still, that means a lot of late night talks by the campfire. This is the closest thing to extended pillow talk as it can be for them while they are still officially platonic. I imagine Beth came to know almost everything about Daryl, a lifetime of things he had never told anybody before, and Daryl probably came to know Beth better in some ways than Maggie could have because of the circumstances and the dynamic. Daryl being fidgety when she holds his hand in Alone, and whenever she looks at him directly from that point on, I think Alone is all about him first trying to ignore it and then start to work up the courage to take a risk and try to tell her. That's so pretty. I love that. It's very sweet, and I hope they at least tell us more of this stuff eventually, if not show us. So I went down a rabbit hole on a hunch that maybe coda could somehow also be a play on the word code, as in a reference to Carol telling Beth that Daryl has his code. In previous videos, it has been stated that Daryl has internalized a lot of things Beth has said to him, so my thinking was that a number of Bethisms have become part of his code. But I found two more ways the word is used beyond that which we have been assuming in terms of the most common definition of the word. Coda is the Italian version of the Latin word cauda. It seems the earliest musical use of this term applied to a style of a cappella music with roots in northern France, including solo a cappella. The coda is, I have no idea if I'm saying that right, by the way, is not an ending to a song in this case. Not a musical expert, but as I understand it, it means staying on a single syllable of a word and holding it through multiple notes, aka a vocal run. In TWD, most of the time, Beth sang a cappella, at least in the prison. Daryl Dixon 1 and 2 are in France with the specific goal of getting to the nest in Normandy, so northern France. Coda is also the word used for a ponytail in Italian. So coda alta means a high ponytail. Coda bassa means a low ponytail, etc. Most of the time when she was shot, Beth had a ponytail. Yeah, great definitions. I'm here for it. I think we'll always, those of us who have studied this will always our ears will perk up when we hear the word coda, even if it's not in reference to TWD. It's given us a complex, I think. Let's see. Just a few more here. This is from Daryl Dixon. In fact, Valentina is the feminine to Valentine or love god. Yep. I love Valentina. I think she's a fun character. Um, this is a really fascinating background and on France and medical research. Good stuff. You guys can go back and watch these videos if you want. 80, so that's kind of an old video. Um, and then oh, we already read that one. Okay, I think I got through all of the YouTube comments, and this has turned out to be kind of a long video, but that's okay because we're caught up now, at least on the YouTube comments, not so much on the asks or the other events. But if you're still here with me, then thanks for staying, and I will try to get caught up on the other things this coming week. I do not know for sure that I will be able to do that because depending on what happens in the episode, we're probably going to have a lot to discuss. But that's okay. We enjoy discussing it, and we'll get through it all eventually. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and continue please sending me your comments and asks. And by the time this posts, the new episode will only be a couple of days away. So get excited for that. I know I am, and I will talk to you again soon.